Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to a Week 5 edition here of the Football Guys Power Grid, all presented by RotoGrinders.com. Of course, this is the show where we talk all things DFS. Should be a fun week for us, too, because we've got a lot of things. We've got some value running backs to look at. We've got rookie starting quarterbacks here this week, and lots of money to be won, and certainly happy to have you guys with us here on YouTube or the podcast feed, wherever you're at. So we always ask you, give us a thumbs up and add some nice comments, please. Nice comments down here in the YouTube. And we always appreciate that. We take a look at it throughout the show. I'm Dan Bach. We got Devin Knotts. We got Phil Alexander and John Tip and Pick Lee. And we're going to get right into this Week 5, fellas, because honestly, last week did not go particularly great for myself. So I need a rebound week. And I'm going to put it squarely on me not being on the show last week. You guys are my key to success. So I'm fully expecting this to change. So, John, let's jump in, look at some of these totals. That's where we like to start off. And, this is a week that we're got a number of games, at that 50 threshold. Sometimes we only have maybe 1, 2. This week we got a handful of them.
Yeah, it's an interesting week this week. The one game that I would love to have seen is that Kansas City game, but that's going to be your showdown slate on Sunday night. I think the Vegas total on that guy is 57. So don't be afraid. Devin, are you writing a showdown article for that Sunday night game?
Yeah, we're doing Thursday, Sunday, Monday now. So
there you go.
Check that out. And it's completely free, so you don't need a Football Guys subscription or anything. So we're doing that all season.
Nice.
Yeah, And Dan, I suspect you have content on RotoGrinders as well for the showdown slates.
No doubt, tons of content. Those have just become incredibly popular. But I can say we probably will not have the showdown slate of Atlanta versus the Jets in England for you guys. So just want to let you know.
Just play Cordero Patterson and you're good to go.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Go 12 hours later for that Buffalo-Kansas City game. It's going to be a barn burner and a lot of fun to watch. But as far as the main slate games go, it's an interesting week because you've got a few games right around that 50-point threshold. The one that's going to be super popular, the Giants against Dallas. Your boy Danny Jones is he's having a big season, and see whether or not he can do it when it counts in an NFC East showdown there in Dallas. Who knock on wood, they look like the real team this year. You've also got Green Bay at the Bengals, which is a game I like, and I'll tell you who I like on that side here in just a bit. And then I think it's really interesting. We've got a number of games in the low or the just below the 50-point threshold, and I wonder whether or not that's going to affect the percent rostered numbers for those games. That's Minnesota against Detroit. You got Tampa Bay and Miami, Tennessee and Jacksonville. All of those in that 48 to 49. And because they don't hit 50, it's that mental thing. It's how they price things $99 instead of $100. I think there are some sneaky plays in each of those games, and we're going to walk through everything tonight. One other thing I'll say on the lower end, we always try to focus on the top end, but on the lower end, last week, if you took Buffalo's defense, you did really well. And if you checked out the Vegas value chart, Buffalo was the number 1 defense last week. This week, without question, it's New England going up against that same Houston offense with Davis Mills under center. They're really expensive, and nobody's going to have them at 4,900. We'll discuss that near the end of the show, whether or not you can be contrarian by paying up and whether or not New England is worth the same money that we spent last week on Buffalo. Other than that, let's get into it.
I love how you said we spent. I did not fall into that we category. I wish I did, because
I had about 20%.
Yeah, well, I think I was maybe a little bit less than that. But man, I mean, that's one of those things. Not to just get off track here, but sometimes we get so cute and we talk about variance with defense, and sometimes it's just so freaking obvious. Yep. And that was probably one of those moments last week. So hopefully we can learn from that. And we'll get into that position a little bit later. But let's dive into the quarterback spot here. And as I talked about in the opening, we get a couple of rookies. Davis Mills, he doesn't count. But Justin Fields, now anointed the starter out there for the Chicago Bears. And by the looks of it, Trey Lance more than likely going to get the start this week. And I want to kind of start with these guys. We still have Trevor Lawrence as well. So tons of these young quarterbacks getting playing time. Devin, I think it was you who was, anti Justin Fields that first week in cash.
Yeah.
So let's go and talk about Trey Lance. His first start, just the early kind of projected numbers have him as one of the more popular guys on the slate. If you want to get Derrick Henry, paying down is obviously a good thing to do at quarterback. How viable is he in cash games this week for the Bills?
Yeah, so before we start, and I'll certainly touch on Trey Lance in just a second, we need to make a gentleman's agreement here, Phil, that we are not going to talk about Baker Mayfield on this show. My heart can't handle the fifth straight week of you mentioning Baker Mayfield as a GPP play. Now that we got that,
I'll shake on that.
Now that we got that out of the way, Trey Lance is in a great spot this week. I think that he's completely in a different situation than what Justin Fields was, because they're going to have to rely on him. They're facing the highest powered offense in football in the Arizona Cardinals, and they're not facing a Cleveland defense that is going to pressure him the entire game. So I think Lance is in a great spot. He looked okay. He had his moments last week. Statistically, it was there were a couple big plays that sort of elevated his stats, but the key number that I'm looking on is 7 carries for 41 yards, which, that's a huge bump if you can get, and what did he play, a half, something like that, to get 41 yards and a half. He's gonna run the ball quite frequently. He's gonna throw the ball deep to Deebo Samuel. He's gonna have those big play potential. And John, what's the over under in that game? You have it up?
In that game, I've got 50 points on the nose.
Yeah, so I mean they're anticipating a big week for Trey Lance. They don't have any sort of running game at all. I think that this is at 5,700 on DraftKings. For me, he's a must-play cash game. Get quarterback this week. I don't know about the rest of the guys.
Wow, must play is interesting. I mean, I think it kind of depends a little bit on maybe one of the other running backs, top-end running backs, whether or not he plays or not, if you want to kind of double jam in that position. And I'm talking about Christian McCaffrey, who right now is kind of questionable, but looks like he might be leaning towards playing. My biggest reservation on that move is Dak Prescott's pretty cheap at 6.9K, or you can go to Daniel Jones, who I've not been a fan of, but he's only 300 more, Phil. So again, you're the tournament guy, and we'll get to some of those, but do you like either of those guys better than Trey Lance?
I think I would rather Trey Lance, and here's my suggestion is roster Lance, play him in cash, don't watch the whole game, only watch the red zone channel. That way you only see the good and you don't see so much of the bad, because it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. But at the end of the day, those stats are going to be there, just like we saw in the second half last week. I mean, he had 20 points after halftime, and that speaks to what Devin was talking about. He's going to run. He's going to throw deep. We saw it in the preseason. He's going to throw touchdowns. I mean, this isn't a Justin Fields situation, because Justin Fields only gets to throw the ball maybe 17, 18 times a game. That's not going to be the case in San Francisco. I don't think that they're going to scheme to hide him the way that Matt Nagy seems to be doing with Justin Fields. So I'm excited about Trey Lance. I think he's going to be a contributor from day one. I don't mind Dak Prescott, certainly in cash if you wanted to pay up. Don't like him in tournaments as much. And I think that Daniel Jones is kind of right there with Lance.
Yeah, just be careful. So there is some breaking news in the last 20 minutes that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to try to practice tomorrow. I don't think he's going to play, but just wanted to throw that out there so that we don't become outdated here in the first couple of minutes of the show.
Yeah, that would be bad. John, where do you fall? I mean, 2 for 2 there on Lance and cash. Again, a lot of things can change. A lot of injury situations can dictate what we do at this position. But here on a Thursday night, what's your feeling?
Yeah, for me, it's one of the guys you mentioned, Dan, and that's probably Daniel Jones. The guy looked tremendous last week, and he's coming up against a Cowboys defense that made Sam Darnold look like a Hall of Fame quarterback last week. The guy had 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, over 300 yards. And Darnold is coming off, Daniel Jones is coming off of a week where he threw for 400 yards himself. And we know this Dallas offense is going to keep Daniel Jones active throughout. So, I mean, Dallas, I don't know. I can look quickly, but I don't think they've scored less than 28 points all season. No, they scored 29, 20, 41, and 36. So, and they are the top team on the Vegas value chart this week at 29.5 implied team total. I think they keep the pressure on Daniel Jones to stay active throughout this one. He doesn't have a great receiving core, which means he's going to be running, and he's been doing a lot of that throughout his career. He's the guy I like for $300 more. I think he's a bit safer than Trey Lance, who I love as a prospect. I just, seeing Justin Fields struggle in his first 2 games, it gives me a little bit of pause of going back to a rookie for cash.
Yeah, let's give you an update real quick on a few other injuries to look at. Tua probably going to miss this week. Last week likely might return, next Sunday. And Jacoby Brissett's going to likely get the start, but tough matchup there against Tampa Bay. We mentioned with Justin Fields, he is now the starter. They take on Vegas. Pretty low total in that game, lower than I kind of expected. And then Teddy Bridgewater, he actually practiced today, so there's a decent chance he may end up going. All right, let's get into some tournament plays here. And, I think that we can, all agree guys like Kyler Murray, always, great play if you can fit them. But, this is a week where there's a couple of guys I think flying under the radar here, Devin, for tournaments. So I want to get your take first up before I chime in with mine.
Yeah, the guy that I'm looking at is Joe Burrow against Green Bay. And Jair Alexander is out, and I don't think it was sort of like late week. I don't really know what happened there, but I think the news broke on Wednesday at 6,100. I think that he has a significant amount of upside. People are going to look at the Green Bay matchup, think it's difficult, but you take away Alexander from this secondary, and they don't have a lot. So Burrow looked good for the first time all season last week. He threw for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns. There's a good stacking opportunity with either Chase or one of the other receivers that they have there. So he's a guy that I'm looking at pretty hard for tournaments. And then the other guy that I'm looking at is Jalen Hurts against Carolina. I just don't believe in that. I know Carolina's defense has been good. I get it. But the acquisitions that they've made, so they know something there. They brought in who's the guy from Jacksonville? CJ Henderson?
CJ Henderson, number 1.
Yeah, and then they brought in Stephon Gilmore. So they're trying to add cornerback talent. Hurts has that rushing upside. I think that this Carolina defense, there's a non-zero chance that they crack at some point until they get the rest of the guys in there. So those are the 2 guys that under the radar for sure, but I think they could be good tournament plays.
Phil, you seem to have an opinion on that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty closely aligned with Devin there, especially on Jalen Hurts. I'm seeing him early coming in about half as popular as Kyler Murray, and I think their ceilings are very similar. The game total's a little bit iffy there, which is probably the reason why he's coming in a little below the radar. But when you look at his passing numbers and how quickly the Eagles are running plays under Nick Sirianni, they're passing a ton. He's rushing 9 times a game. He's never in a full start where he didn't get benched. Come in with less than 21 DraftKings points in a game. That's 3x his current salary. So I think you could even look at him for cash if you were so inclined. I mean, there's better cash game plays out there. But I think the roster percentage makes him an excellent tournament play. His floor is high and his ceiling might be as high as any quarterbacks on the slate in any given week. And the other guy that I was looking at is actually on the other side of the game Devin mentioned, and that is Aaron Rodgers. I think that Devontae Adams is going to be pretty popular, but Rodgers isn't coming along for the ride. And at 7,100, he's definitely going to get shaded by Dak Prescott, who's right in the same price range. Brady is a few $100s up, and I think people are going to like him against Miami. But the matchup against the Bengals is neutral at best. Green Bay's got a 27-point implied total. The only reason I'm not 100% sold on it is because we'll get to it, but Rodgers running back might be my favorite GPP running back of the week. So that's the only reason I'm still a little undecided on Rodgers, but I am interested in the Green Bay side of that game.
One thing on Hurts I want to make a quick note of. I mean, the competition he's played this year have really set up for some good offensive performances. Kansas City, Dallas, Atlanta, and even San Francisco. Now, even going back to last year, he did kind of do what we saw this year with the rushing ability, but I'm going to disagree in terms of your take on Carolina maybe not being that great. I'm not saying they're great, but I don't know taking Hurts on the road in this situation at this increase in price is anything I'm overly excited about. Yes, the number of people who are playing him is going to be less than we've seen previously, but I think this is a really tough matchup for him in that total. John, your thoughts here on quarterbacks? We can wrap this up.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I don't like the Hurts call, especially at the price at 7,000. I just feel like it's too much. He definitely won't be highly owned. So if you want to go contrarian, I'm fine with that. I don't think the matchup is that much. I don't believe in the Panthers defense either. I just don't. I don't think that this is. I don't know that he has the upside that Phil believes he has. The play that I love, Devin stole from me, and I even held up my Joe Burrow auto rookie card there. I'm a big fan of Joe Burrow this week in that game against Green Bay. I think all of his receivers have high upside. We'll talk more about which ones and how ownership may affect my stance on them. But as of tonight, I like all three, and we'll see how the ownership affects which ones I like more or less going into the weekend. I just think that game could be an absolute shootout. And there are some questions with Joe Mixon at running back, so maybe that means that Burrow drops back a bit more. And then the other quarterback I like quite a bit is Kirk Cousins this week. If you've listened to the show more than once, you probably heard that a lot of my exposure to quarterbacks is driven by the receivers and who I like at receiver. And this week I like the Minnesota receivers against Detroit. They have the second highest implied team total. They're 10-point favorites, and I think that's going to draw a lot of action over to Dalvin Cook and the running game for all the reasons it should. And we're going to see the passing game go underlooked or under-owned. And so Kirk Cousins at 6,500, he's got two of the best receivers with high upside. And as of Thursday night, when I looked at some of the preliminary percent rostered numbers, I thought they were too low given the type of upside that they bring to the table.
I can agree with you guys on Burrow. He was one of the guys that I was looking at. Two other names, though, that I think maybe even I'll throw in a third here, but I think both quarterbacks in that Tennessee-Jacksonville are intriguing, especially in tournaments, because you're going to get leverage off of what appears to be a mega chalk in Derrick Henry and even a pretty chalky James Robinson in terms of the early numbers that are coming out. So you're gaining leverage there. And Lawrence, the thing about him at 5,800, his rushing has been more and more prevalent each and every week. He's had 8 carries and 6 carries each of the last 2 games. And those are designed runs. Those are not just getting out of the pocket and scrambling. So had a touchdown on the ground last week. And I just think that game, you look at the total in it, pretty solid right there. And that one at a 49. And I think people are going to overlook it and just play the running backs. And I think both those quarterbacks could be sneaky in this game at probably like sub 5% ownership. So I'm throwing those guys out there. And if you want to really go dumpster diving, even less than Trey Lance, we got Mac Jones. Then maybe they'll just run Damian Harris down their throat. But he is playing the Houston Texans, who are just absolutely awful. Maybe this is finally that get-right spot for Jones to throw a couple of touchdowns. And, again, another guy that you could play as a cheap quarterback this week. All right, certainly let's do a quick recap. Your top cash options. Consensus seems to be around Trey Lance. John likes Daniel Jones. I'll throw Dak Prescott in there. And then our favorite GPP options, I think the consensus was Joe Burrow. We had a little Jalen Hurts conversation in there, and I will also throw in both players from that Jags and Tennessee Titans game. Appreciate you guys joining us here on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment. And if you're not a subscriber on Football Guys or on RotoGrinders.com, great time to do it, especially on RotoGrinders if you're playing other sports. This is you get our combo package. You got NFL, you get college football, you get NBA starting up, you got MLB playoffs, PGA, all on one price. And, of course, Football Guys, just a tremendous value for you guys week in and week out in terms of playing DFS. So check us both out. All right, let's get to the running back position. And the top news, of course, this week was David Montgomery out 4 to 5 weeks. And the question here is whether or not Damian Williams is going to play this week. If he does, he's 5.6K over on DraftKings. Christian McCaffrey practiced a little bit today on Thursday and says, I think he feels like he's good to go this week. And that's certainly a discussion point we have to have today. Dalvin Cook didn't practice, but says, I'm playing through the pain. I don't know about that, Dalvin. Not what I would be doing, but that is his status. Joe Mixon didn't practice. I don't think he's going to play this week. Samaje Perine at 4K would be the obvious guy to likely get some of that work. And Chase Edmonds, no practice here on Thursday. We've seen James Conner get all the work on the goal line, and if Edmonds wouldn't play, potentially could be a solid option there. Okay, let's go to you, Phil, with these running backs. Give me your top takes because, man, there's a guy that's been frustrating to DFS over the years who looks like the mega chalk on this slate.
Yeah, so you're referring to Derrick Henry, who has made a habit of trampling your Jacksonville Jaguars over the years. I was looking at the Football Guys Game Log Dominator tool today, and 3 out of the last 6 times Henry faced the Jags, dating back to 2018, he's been the overall RB1 on the slate. Jacksonville this year, they've been a little bit better against the run than they have been against the pass. I don't know that that means that they're a defense to be feared against the run, and certainly not against Derrick Henry, who's probably going to get 30 carries. And by the end of the day, we see what that means pretty much each and every week this year. Plus, he's even catching a few passes. So given the rest of the landscape at running back, as well as how loose pricing got this week because of some of these value running back plays, I think that jamming in Derrick Henry is an easy and obvious choice for cash games. And speaking of some of those value plays that I'd be considering for cash, I think you have to look at what Leonard Fournette did last week. Dominated touches out of that backfield. He got the 1 goal line carry snaked by Ronald Jones, but especially if Giovanni Bernard sits again. I think he returned to a limited practice today, but it's unclear whether or not he'll play. But if Fournette is getting that passing down work and he's at home as a 10-point favorite against the Dolphins, who are, again, easier to run on than they are to pass on, I would certainly be looking at Fournette as kind of the best of that bunch. That includes Damian Williams in that same range. I'm not too interested in.
Do we really trust Fournette, though?
That was my question.
I do.
He's too cheap. There's no doubt. But do we trust him?
The weather was The weather was awful on Sunday night against New England. He had 11 carries, 4 carries, and 20 carries. If he goes back down to like 10, 11, 12,
he's still worth it.
It's all about the passing game work because Tom Brady's going to be targeting his running back. So if Bernard is out and he's good for 5 or 6 screen passes, I think you're going to see a line that looks exactly like the ones he was putting up in the playoffs last year.
They're 10-point favorites. If he gets into the end zone, he
hasn't scored a touchdown all year.
Regression.
I mean, it's a valid point. Phil. I mean, I think Devin's onto something here, but I think the question to ask is because sometimes when you build these lineups, at least I do, and maybe I shouldn't play scared like this, but there's times where, especially mainly in cash games, tournaments are very different, where I'll sit back and say, "Gosh, I don't want to get beat by this guy.
Yeah,
I don't love him, but I don't want to get beat by him." And if you don't play Leonard Fournette in cash, I think there's a decent shot you could be in deep trouble if he has one of these games because I think it's Henry 1, Fournette 2 in terms of popularity this week. especially.
All right, let's talk about the Buccaneers. No cheating here. Red zone touches, and you already know what stance I have. But red zone touches: Jones, Bernard, Fournette, Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, Gronkowski. Who has the most?
You're probably saying it because Fournette probably does, but that tells you he's not efficient in scoring. So, no, I mean, look, if Samaje Perine wasn't on this slate, I would be fine with it. But at 4K, I would much rather just go down to Perine if Mixon is out.
Don't play bad players. That's
Leonard Fournette is a bad player.
I was going to say
Leonard Fournette a bad player. Leonard Fournette is a former number 4 overall pick.
Trent Richardson was number 3.
He produced 1,000-yard. He produced 1,000-yard seasons back to back in Jacksonville. He went to Tampa Bay. He immediately supplanted Ronald Jones before he got hurt. Then he came back, led Brady to his legacy-defining championship. I mean, why is Leonard Fournette bad? Why does he have such a tarnished brand?
He's never had back-to-back 100-yard seasons.
He's
averaging 3.9 yards per carry.
Leonard Fournette has talent, man. He gets a bad rap in this community, and I don't know what he did.
Leonard Fournette had great talent like his freshman year of college. Devin can back me up on that, but I think he's been underperforming since. But it still goes back to, I don't know if I've got the stones to have this guy decide my cash game, because if he scores 2 touchdowns and I don't have him, it's an uphill battle.
You would be positive throughout your career betting against Leonard Fournette.
You're right.
He's the only guy on the slate at the running back position whose projections have him above 3x value, and it's not even close. The next guy is something like 20% lower. You've got to have him in cash, period.
I will not have him in cash, so whoever wants to play
maybe on DraftKings. I don't know about FanDuel, but on DraftKings you have to have him in cash. It's too much of a risk.
Nope.
Yeah, I feel like I want to be like Devin, but I don't have the stones to do it. So I'll probably just play him in cash and hope to win everywhere else. If McCaffrey plays, we're looking at a guy at 8.7K here against Philadelphia. And just to give some context, he was 9.9 against the Jets week 1, 10K against New Orleans in week 2. What do you think about McCaffrey? I mean, if he says I'm going to go, I think we would agree that's probably too cheap of a price for him, right, John?
It's definitely too cheap of a price for him if he's healthy and he's playing 100%. I'm going to give the advice that I'll give here is what I do every Sunday morning. When there's a player like this, and the same thing happened last week with Dalvin Cook. I woke up on Sunday morning, I logged onto Twitter, and I followed Dr. Gene Bramall from Footballguys, who we all know and love. Gene knows more about this than just about anybody on planet Earth, and I'm really not making that up. And I just listen to whatever he says. If he says that there's a maximum touch 12 to 15, then I know that I'm not playing them. And last week I X'd out Dalvin Cook, and it turned out to be the right decision. I'm going to do the same thing this week. In Dr. Gene, I trust. And if you're not following him, I'll get you his Twitter handle before the end of the show. He's the guy that I'd be looking at. But unless he's playing 100% of snaps, and typically that's what he does when he's fully healthy, I can't go for him at 8,700.
Devin, you mentioned Perine as a guy you liked on the cheap. He's 4K on DraftKings. I mean, that's a bare minimum. Tell us why you think he's a better play. Now, obviously, you save money off of Fournette, but sell us a little bit more on Perine.
Yeah, if Leonard, I can't get my Leonard Fournette off my mind.
Freudian slip.
Yeah. If Joe Mixon is out, Perine is going to get a majority of the carries, if not all the carries this week. And we talked about that game potentially being a relatively high scoring game. We like both of the quarterbacks there. In the 2 games that he really played last year, he averaged 3 catches per game. So if he gets 2 to 3 catches on that 4K salary, and he gets, 12 to 13, 14 carries, he's going to pay off value. He averaged 4.8 yards per carry last week. I know it's a limited sample size, but you're not dealing with a plotter like Leonard Fournette, who's like 3.5 throughout his career. He's a guy that going up against Green Bay, it's not a prohibitive matchup. Green Bay is averaging about 100 yards rushing per game on the season. So I think at 4K, he allows you to just do so much with your roster that it makes it incredibly intriguing.
So what do you think the split's going to be, guys? I mean, Chris Evans is there too, right? Do you think they're going to give Samaje the full gamut? Because I don't. I think at
80-20.
Oh, no. I don't think – I think it's 60-40 at best. It could be 50-50.
What do you guys ready? You guys ready for the Samaje Perine stat line? It's going to be 13 carries, 42 yards, 0 touchdowns, less than 3 catches, and you're going to be mad at yourself that you rostered him.
That's like 2.2x right there. Like – that's fine.
What do you do last year when Mixon didn't play? What were his stat lines there?
Last year he had 13 carries, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it was a 30-point DraftKings game last year.
13 carries, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus 4 receptions for 41 yards.
Yeah, man, he
has upside against. I mean, he has just as much upside as Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, well, wait a second now. You cherry-picked that one game. I'm looking
well, he didn't have many games. It's not like he had that many games.
He had 6 games, Dan.
With Mixon out, where he was the full-fledged getting all the work?
No, Gio Bernard was there for getting a vast – Gio Bernard had 25 carries in one game. He had one game where Gio Bernard wasn't there.
But there were 6 games.
The point.
Okay, well, but you can't cherry-pick that one game.
Yes, I can. The situation is different when there was other running backs there, John.
The day that Samaje that he had the 95 yards and 2 touchdowns, Gio was on the field that day as well.
That's fair. Let's move on.
I'll give you that, but I will say that Perine is the clear guy, and I think that at 4K on DraftKings, I think I'm playing him in cash games.
I'm only sorry that I'm not going to be on the show next week to gloat about this alongside Phil. Phil, be doubly obnoxious about this. All right, thank you.
I got you.
Okay, we got other running backs that we need to talk about. Devin, give me a couple other names that you're looking at here.
Sure. So a couple other names that I'm looking at. I really like the Cleveland backfield this week for GPPs. This Los Angeles Chargers defense has not stopped anybody on the ground. I think they're the worst defense against the run, which is a significant issue going up against the best rushing offense in football. So the Chargers, 4th worst. Apologies. They're averaging 140 yards rushing. I think both Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt are in tremendous spots for GPPs. Looking at other running backs that potentially you could take, I like Damian Harris quite a bit, 5.5K going up against Houston. He's had some games earlier this year where I think it was week 1. Hasn't done a ton recently, but they played the Saints and the Bucs, which are the 2 best run defenses in football. He doesn't have to deal with that this week going up against Houston. So in his 2 games not facing those 2 defenses that I mentioned, he had 100 yards and then he had 62 yards and a touchdown. So he averaged 19 carries in those games at 5.5K against Houston. I think that's too good of a price.
John?
In cash games, I like most of the guys we've already talked about. Derrick Henry, Fournette is a foregone conclusion. And by the way, I think Fournette is an excellent tournament play based on the early numbers. If he goes off in less than 25% of rosters, then that'll be an injustice. And you've heard it here. You heard it here on Thursday night.
You're gonna luck out when you're not on the show next week. I'm just telling you right now. You're gonna luck out to not have to deal with some of these outcomes, but we'll see.
All right. Well, the other running back, we've talked about a couple other folks. I'm gonna give you one GPP running back that I really like, and then I'm going to throw a question to you, Dan, for because it's a Jacksonville question. The running back I really like this week in GPPs is Zeke Elliott. He's 7,000. There's going to be a ton of ownership on the passing game in Dallas. Dallas 7-point favorite. People aren't going to want to roster Zeke because of what Tony Pollard has done, and rightfully so. But he's still Zeke Elliott, and he's 7,000. He's priced accordingly. If Tony Pollard wasn't in the backfield, he'd be 8,700. He'd be 9,000 in this game with the highest implied team total on the slate as touchdown home favorites against a team. The Giants won one game for the first time last week. I think that there's a great spot for Zeke to be a GPP winner. Now, Dan, I have for cash games James Robinson against Tennessee at 6,000. Am I out of my gourd for thinking that that's a possibility?
I mean, he's number one in our projected rostered player behind Derrick Henry right now at 22%. We got Fournette at 20. So I don't think you're alone in that thought process. And I don't hate it. I mean, you take DJ Chark out of the equation, you've got to, right now their number 3 wide receivers, Tavon Austin. So, they don't have a lot to lean on in the passing game. So I think it's viable. I don't think it's like a slam dunk. I don't think it's something that you have to play. But I think he's viable. I probably won't be playing him. But Phil, you said Zeke Elliott, and next thing I know, I heard you ruffle your black-eyed Joe. So it seems like you're on that play.
Yeah, he's the leverage play almost every week. It was the same spot last week. Everybody loads up on Dak Prescott and the passing game, and it leaves Zeke Elliott underowned. Absolutely, you should be doing that this week as well because you've got the Cowboys as big favorites, as John mentioned, and you've seen what they're doing. Prescott's not throwing that much. I just want to throw that out there, too, is that if you're doing a Cowboys stack, you have to be really confident that Daniel Jones is going to keep them close because otherwise Zeke is going to come in like that boa constrictor and he's going to be the one running the ball in the second half and they're going to kill that clock at the expense of the Dallas passing game. And then the last running back I wanted to mention really quick is Aaron Jones. I had alluded to it earlier when I talked about Aaron Rodgers. Jones, I think, is going to come off around 5% rostered, and I think that is a spot that we could leverage because he's almost up there with Derrick Henry, right? He's 7,900 and Henry's 9,000. So I don't think that anybody's going to be looking at Aaron Jones. They might think that A.J. Dillon stealing 15 carries last week is a trend, but again, I think that's a miscalculation. That was clock killing mode. Packers were in control of that game. This game is on the road. It should be a lot closer. I think we're going to see the normal 70-30 split, and I think that Jones has a 40-point ceiling just like Henry does. And, if Henry's 30% and Jones is 5%, it's leverage on Henry, and it's going to be leverage on Adams, who's going to be popular on the Green Bay side.
So one last thing I want to point out, some props are starting to come out for this week, and nobody's really talking about Alvin Kamara this week. He's 8,600, and these were his props the first 4 weeks rushing yards, 54, 68, 57, and 75. They play Washington this week, and he's got a rushing prop of 82.5 yards. That is really, really high for him. I don't know if Vegas is seeing something that I'm not, or maybe we should just run to our local sports book and just bet the under on that one.
Hold on one second. I need to bet that.
That's a big number. And that was just one of those moments where I'm always shopping kind of our projections versus some of these prop lines. And that one popped off the page for me. And I believe of Vegas on a lot of things, but they can get player props wrong, and they might have gotten that one wrong. So a quick recap for you. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, if you're playing him this week, play him on FanDuel, not on DraftKings. He's not getting the catches that he's gotten in previous years because Breeze used to check down. Jameis is always looking for the big play. So play him over at FanDuel if you're going to play him. Go ahead, Dan.
It's just hard to play him, though, now because Taysom's, 3 touchdowns the last 2 games, and it's just killing his equity in the red zone. Quick recap for you. Top cash game plays, Derrick Henry, no question about it, followed by Leonard Fournette. I think Devin and I think that Samaje Perine fall into that bucket, and I do think we'll see James Robinson with some ownership in your cash games. Comes down to GPPs. Obviously, you can play a lot of different guys, but Zeke Elliott and Aaron Jones featured both by Tip and Pick. And Phil, I'm with Devin here a little bit and looking at, I think Nick Chubb's the guy. Didn't score a touchdown each of the last 2 games, and I think he had touchdowns in like 8 straight before that. So he's going to get back in the end zone. The touches, the yardage are there. If he scores twice, he's sub 7K this week. So I think he's an interesting tournament pivot. Again, you're joining us here on the DFS Power Grid, powered by both Football Guys and RotoGrinders.com. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're catching this on the Audible or maybe the RotoGrinders Daily Fantasy Football feed, the podcast version, you don't want to see our beautiful faces, I don't blame you for that. But do us a favor anyway and leave us a nice review. It helps certainly the podcast rankings when you do that. And know we've got tons of content all week long on both of those platforms. So appreciate you guys subscribing to that. And if you haven't done so, do that search and get it in your daily pod streams. All right, let's move on to that wide receiver position. And A.J. Brown practiced full today, played a little bit yesterday. I think he's back this week. Can't say the same for Julio Jones, as he did not practice here today. So we'll keep our eye on that. Chase Claypool limited both Wednesday and Thursday, but speculation is he is likely to play this week. Both of those top wide receivers for the Giants did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, Slayton and Shepard. So we'll see if Mr. Tony is back in our lives. And T. Higgins, limited again today, limited yesterday. Speculation is he is going to play. Will Fuller, big shock. Will Fuller got hurt, everybody. Happens every single year. And he's out on the IR, so he's going to miss a handful of weeks. But the wide receiver position, I think this is a week where, we're going to have Cowboys. It's just a matter of which one you want. Is it Lamb? Is it Cooper? What a weird situation we saw last week, John, where Cooper, he actually got hurt like the first quarter of the game, and he actually came back and scored a touchdown. I thought for sure the moment that Amari Cooper went to the sideline, he was done. But gutted it out and helped those who played him last week. He's that same kind of 6K price this week on DraftKings. I got to think he's going to be one of the featured players on most people's lineups.
Yeah, we've already talked about this in the sense that the Cowboys receivers, they're both going to be popular, both meaning Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. If you give me the choice between the two, they're really close. I prefer CeeDee, and if you wanted to take the other side, I wouldn't fault you for it. I think CeeDee's a great play this week, and he's probably due for a bit of positive regression. He's had a few slow weeks over the past few weeks. Those tight ends, Dalton Schultz is not going to score 3 touchdowns across 2 games for the rest of the season, especially with the snap counts he's gotten. I would advise people to stay away from Dalton Schultz if it matters, if anybody wants to listen. Cash game plays. We're maybe running a little bit behind here, and I want to make sure that we do this position justice, because I think this position this week is where tournaments are won or lost, because there are a lot of different options. Cash game plays, if you can fit Devontae Adams in, you jam him in despite his bad game last week. CeeDee Lamb, we just talked about. Tyler Boyd against Green Bay. He's one of the 3 receivers that I like. He's the one I probably like most for cash. Antonio Brown is a spectacular play this week for cash games, 5,200. The guy's only playing about 50% of the snaps, but he's just so efficient. And Tom Brady is using him in just the way that he needs to use him. And then I think the one that's going to be uber popular as Dan, our 3K crappers, they're back this week. Curtis Samuel. I know he disappointed last week, but this week he's 3K again. I think he's going to be really popular for folks who want to save salary and jam. If you go with the Dak Prescott, Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, you got to go with somebody super cheap, and it's going to be Curtis Samuel there in Washington. And I'll stop there
with that one. He's dealing with the groin injury that he missed practice yesterday, and I think he was limited today. So they said they're going to be really careful in bringing him back. So I would just be careful with that one just a little bit and monitor that one.
So I said earlier I would come back with this. It's at Gene Bramall, spelled with a J. Sunday morning, go to Dr. Gene. He'll tell you exactly what to do.
Devin, we're without DJ Chark in Jacksonville. Again, we mentioned a 49 total. Does Shenault or Marvin Jones interest you in terms of guys who are going to probably be peppered with some targets, might be playing from behind here? Shenault last week got like 30% target share. I know he doesn't go downfield, but feels too cheap at 4,800. Am I a Jags homer with this take, or is he viable for us?
Is he averaging like 6 yards a catch? I mean, that's the problem.
He had 99 yards last week, so
yeah, I guess he did have a better
going
year.
up in the better direction.
As a tournament play, I think he's fine. I don't know that I'm going there in cash games because I'm saving all the money with Trey Lance and Samaje Perine. So, but I'm moving on up this week. I'm going with Justin Jefferson as my top wide receiver. And look, I mean, Justin Jefferson quickly becoming one of the top 3, 4, 5 receivers in the league. He doesn't really have to deal with that Adam Thielen kind of yo-yoing that we had to deal with last year. He scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. And I think it was John. Somebody mentioned Kirk Cousins, and I think that as a tournament stack, you can definitely stack both of those players going up against Detroit, which their secondary is horrendous. No Jeff Okudah out for the year. If you can fit Jefferson in cash, I don't think you can because of Devontae Adams, but man, is he intriguing. Going down the board a little bit, I do like the Bengals situation is probably the most challenging. I think I agree with John that Tyler Boyd is the cash game play. I think Jamar Chase is the GPP guy. And then going down just a little bit more, I do like Kenny Golladay a little bit as far as a tournament play goes. Daniel Jones to Kenny Golladay, they're still dealing with some banged up receiving core there. But I'm paying up this week where I can for wide receivers because I think that the top end can really provide some difference, especially in cash where, you go Derrick Henry, you go Trey Lance, you go Perine, and then you have a bunch of money with no Kelsey on this slate to spend up at the wide receiver spot. And John is laughing at everything that I'm saying.
No, I actually agree with most of your picks, except for your cash games. So when I hear Trey Lance, Samaje Perine, it scares me. But I do agree.
I like Daniel Jones too. So if you're worried about Trey Lance, I'm fine with Daniel Jones in cash.
Yeah, I think Daniel Jones
Phil,
is the call there.
Where are you landing on some of these guys for GPPs?
So GPPs, you mentioned Laviska Shenault, who I do think might attract the crowd due to that $4,800 salary on DraftKings. So I think for $900 more, I'd rather look at Marvin Jones, who will probably come in with somewhere around half of the roster percentage. We definitely want to target a Jacksonville wide receiver in that game. Dan, you mentioned earlier Trevor Lawrence being a good way to go to get different in GPPs, and I think I would stack him with Jones. When you look at the wide receivers who are beating Tennessee, Christian Kirk with a deep ball, Tyler Lockett with deep passes, Corey Davis last week on a beautiful throw from Zach Wilson downfield, and I think that Jones has a little bit more of that skill set. Or at the very least, he's being used more in that way. I think that Chenault's ADOT is something like 4.8, as Devin alluded to, which is pretty lousy. So I like Marvin Jones. If we're just looking for leverage in the same game, because we know that a lot of ownership is going to concentrate on Derrick Henry. A.J. Brown, you mentioned, was back to practice. So if he's in full and he's healthy and Julio Jones is out, 6,500. That's a $600 discount from his week 1 price in a fantastic matchup. I think you could go that route. And there's one more that I'm looking at that's kind of a pay up to be contrarian kind of thing. This is a pure GPP play, terrible point per dollar type of play. But Mike Williams against the Browns. We've been seeing a lot of alpha type wide receivers, like X receivers, the prototypical guys beating up on Cleveland. Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson last week. Well, Tyreek Hill is really not a prototypical X, but a wide receiver one, the guys that are commanding the targets in the offense. And last week was a little bit of an exception. The Raiders kind of took him away, but I don't see that as being the case in Cleveland. I think they're really trying to funnel targets towards Williams, and I think that he could beat those Cleveland DBs. So that game, by the way, sneaky shootout potential. Devin mentioned that LA can't stop the running backs. And if that's the case, Justin Herbert's going to be firing. And we saw on Monday night in primetime, he looks phenomenal. So I think that's
Browns were also like 1 for 22 in the red zone last week. So it could be a lot of field goals.
Could be, that one could go either way, but if that's a shootout, it's one that no one's going to be on. So I don't mind the Herbert Williams run it back with one of those running backs type of builds and GPPs. You're going to have nobody on that.
Yeah, one more name that I have to mention. I thought he was going to be brought up in cash is Darnell Mooney, 4.8K, 7 targets with Justin Fields. He was the only guy that had more than 3. I think that he's a pretty safe low-end type receiver if you're looking to save some money.
I'd like to point out that he was recommended by Tip and Pick last week on the show as a cash game play, and Tip and Pick received a lot of flack for that. Just for the record, in case anybody forgot. Hey, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, I think that was a great. I mean, he made a lot of sense at 3.9 last week. The rise in price and the fact that he's so dependent in deep balls worries me a little bit in cash games here. So that's my only reservation. But yeah. I think he's a great play in tournaments. And if you're going to play Justin Fields at all in GPPs, if you're going to sprinkle him in, set that stack because that could pop twice. And if it does, you're going to be way ahead of the field, I think, because not many people are going to play Fields this week.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that's written on my GPP list. I'll give you 2 other names, and then we can move on to tight ends. 2 guys that kind of popped. Devin, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to get to percent rostered yet, but Jalen Waddle is a guy I'm interested in. Here, I looked over at RotoGrinders, 4%. RotoGrinders, I think, has him at 2. Is that right, Dan?
I think he'll be higher than that.
Yeah, I mean. It's always dicey doing this on Thursday night, but yeah. If he goes off at less than 10%, he's going to be a really sharp GPP play this week against Tampa Bay as a run back option. When you think about doing a Tampa Bay team stack, you can go Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Antonio Brown, and run that back with Jalen Waddle. I think it's a really nice correlation play. The other play I like this week, and I know, Phil, you follow this pretty closely. If you're an air yards fanatic, Jacoby Myers makes a lot of sense this week. The guy has been doing just about everything he can do there in New England, and he's bound for some positive scoring regression. Every week he's got 60 yards, 70 yards, 80 yards, 90 yards, 6 or 8 catches. All right, and Phil, we were doing so well, and now you have to bring up the red black-eyed Joe. I think he's an excellent play this week at 5,600. In fact, I may place a wager on him scoring a touchdown this week because I think that he's long overdue, and the game it sets up well for him in the sense that I don't think that there are a lot of other talented players on that offense. And Phil, go ahead and tell me why you don't like him.
Just because he never scores touchdowns. That's just who he is. He's an empty receptions kind of guy. That offense isn't that good. And I think the red zone throws are going to go through Hunter Henry this week. Also, just to touch on the Dolphins thing, everything that you said, but Devontae Parker instead of Jalen Waddle would be my take.
And I think both those guys are viable. I mean, this Tampa Bay secondary is really, really bad. They lost another key component this week, and got Richard Sherman a week ago off the nobody wants me type of heap. So it's a pass funnel, and it's not a very good secondary. So I wish they had a better quarterback than Jacoby Brissett to throw the ball, but I get it. One quick note on AJ Brown, I want to spotlight him as well. I love that call, Phil. Last 2 games against Jacksonville, 112 yards, 135 yards. And, I'm just giving you all the freebies here today. Devin, you can go make this bet right now. Prop right now, 50.5 yards on A.J. Brown. Come on, that's with no Julio. If somehow he doesn't play, the bet gets voided. That's a lock on the over, boys and girls. So throwing that one out there. Okay, quick review for you. Cash games, we certainly like Devontae Adams. We like both the quarterbacks there from the Dallas Cowboys. And from the value side of things, think you could maybe consider a guy like Curtis Samuel, assuming his health looks all right. From the value side of things as well, I think Laviska Shenault is going to work his way into a number of lineups. And Justin Jefferson, another name that has been talked about here in this GPP section. Okay, let's go to tight ends. Weird week for tight ends. Like, no Kelsey here. We've got, no Mark Andrews. And right now we've got Evan Ingram as, the highest projected player at this position, which, from an ownership side of things, and that seems quite ridiculous. So
I have to ask John and Phil how Will Dissly did last week.
Oh, jeez. How did Will Dissly do? I know because I played him. Like I said, I didn't have a good week last week. But it's a tricky position here. I mean, Devin, we'll start with you. You might have had the answers last week. Who's the easy
Hunter
choice?
Henry. Hunter Henry going up against Houston. Houston has allowed the most points to opposing tight ends on this slate, 19.4 to the position. Hunter Henry is the number one guy. I know Jonnu Smith is there, but he's not really involved. 9 catches over the last 2 games for Henry. He's becoming Mac Jones's security blanket at 3.8K. I think that he's in a tremendous spot this week. He's not, he doesn't have crazy upside, but as a cash game play, that's where I'm looking.
1.8% right now on our projections.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we're wrong, like, how wrong are we going to be? I mean, like I say, I don't agree with Evan Ingram at 12%, George Kittle at 11%, Jared Cook at 11%. Maybe it is George Kittle at that number that looks way too low there, Phil. I mean, typically we're used to seeing him as a mid-6, upper-6, low-7, and he's at 5.6 this week against Arizona. Does Lance at all being the QB scare you off of Kittle?
No, not that much, because I think that Lance is going to be throwing, and I think that Kittle is going to do his normal thing. You mentioned his price, and it's too low. It would be in the mid-6s if he hadn't gotten a touchdown catch jarred loose in the end zone in last week's game. The only thing with Kittle is he healthy enough? He is dealing with a calf injury. He's not practicing again, but it was kind of the same thing last week. And he went on to play 92% of the snaps. 20 targets over the last 2 weeks. He's got a ceiling. I guess the floor is kind of low with Lance. It's a little bit of an unknown, but I think 5,600 is too cheap. I think he's an excellent play, whether it's tournaments or whether it's cash games.
All right, John. I mean, I think this is an interesting position. I think there's just a lot of ways we can go. What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I have the money, I'm going with Kittle for the reasons that Phil's just described. I mean, the guy last week, he was supposedly injured and he played 92% of the snaps. And, if it was a year ago, we have short memories in this game, but if it was a year ago, this guy, his salary would be $6,500. So you're getting him at a 30% discount. But if I can't afford him, I'm not going to Hunter Henry. I don't know.
Me neither.
It's a bit too expensive for me.
You also didn't like Dalton Schultz last week, but that's a whole other thing.
Oh, Dalton Schultz is a terrible play every week.
Yeah.
The guy plays, I mean, I'll have to look it up here, but he plays like a substandard number of snaps. He doesn't run a lot of routes. He's just been overly efficient. And if you keep relying on that, you're going to be long-term negative EV. I know it's worked out the last couple of weeks, but it's a sucker's play. In terms of what he's running. Routes run, he's run over the past 4 weeks, 11%, 7%, 28%, 37%, and yet the guy continues to deliver on on fantasy goodness. That's just nobody's that efficient.
36% target share and 28 the last 2 weeks.
When he's on the field, he's targeted.
So the guy I like this week is Cameron Brates at 3,300. If you're going to go down, that's a game. Again, we're always targeting those high scoring teams. Tampa Bay's got it's about the third highest implied team total, 28 points or 29 points on the week. And with Gronk not playing, he's the guy I want to be going for. And then in terms of GPPs, I'm going to make Devin's top blow with this one because I remember arguing about the same player about 3 years ago. Well, he's played for the same team, Ricky Seals-Jones. 2,500. He's my guy this week. In terms
2K
of
crapper.
Wasn't he the guy that you had to paint your face for?
Pretty sure. I don't remember who I painted. Well, it's funny because I remember who you shaved your head for, but I don't remember who I painted.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Ricky Seals-Jones.
And for you, it was Ladarius Green. These are the prices we pay for being, analysts.
We should have had a Perine versus Fournette bet. That's right.
Sure. Next week, if I lose, I'll wear something, whatever you want on Thursday night.
All right, we'll figure something out.
All right, Ricky Seals-Jones. If he stays lower than about 12% in terms of ownership, really sharp play this week. The other one is Cole Kmet against Las Vegas, and I think I like that one a bit more because of some of the questions there inside the red zone for Chicago. He's a big target. D-Mont is not going to be there. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Damian Williams being able to get it into the end zone. I think Cole Kmet is kind of sneaky this week for tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to have a lot of conviction on any of these guys because I think you could make a case for, a guy like Robert Tonyan this week at 4.3 against Cincinnati, especially if we like the Cincinnati side is a potential, run back. And, we're still without MVS, so he kind of makes sense. Hawkinson, 5.5, not a bad price on him. Another game that potentially could shoot out there between Minnesota and Detroit. So I don't think we suddenly forget about him. And man, I'm gonna have some Tannehill and Anthony Ferkser at 3.1K. Jacksonville has been dreadful versus that tight end position this week. If Julio's there, I'm definitely not doing it. But if it's just AJ Brown and you want to do put him in your stacks, you certainly could. But crazy tough week, I think, for tight ends. Okay, quickly on defense, we talked a little bit about it earlier today. And as John says, the Patriots look like, an expensive option, but one that probably can't miss. On the lower end, though, guys, I have a tough time not going with Washington in my cash games against New Orleans. I mean, it's Jameis Winston on the road against a team. That secondary's bad, but they can rush the passer a little bit. And if they get Winston flustered, we've seen some of his god-awful decisions that he's made in his career, even this season. I think they're like second or third lowest priced on DraftKings. If I'm punting, I'm probably punting with that team. Give me some defense takes.
On FanDuel, you have to play the Patriots at 5K. So their algorithm seems to be broken. I have them at 24% rostered right now. Just because, Davis Mills is not an NFL quarterback. He's probably not a college quarterback. He's probably like a low-end D2 quarterback. Defense this week, I wish the Titans weren't 3.8K because I could see with all the Urban Meyer stuff going on that they just totally crap the bed. But
do it.
I'm going. I like the Raiders against Chicago. I think that they're able to get some pass rush on fields. We saw Detroit's defense is not an NFL caliber defense. He faces a middle defense is what I would say. Cleveland's the top end. Detroit's the bottom end. It's like Goldilocks. He's somewhere in the middle. But we'll see how he does against a good defense. But I'm not sold completely on Fields just yet.
I like the Eagles. I like the Eagles at 2,200. They're the second cheapest defense. They've had some pretty tough matchups so far. They've had Kansas City, Dallas, San Francisco. The one good matchup they had was against Atlanta. They scored 10 points that game. they're 2,200. I'll save the money there and just think that Sam Darnold isn't the guy that he's been pretty good since he's gone to Carolina, but I still see him in a Jets uniform. I can't help it.
Just Russian touchdown machine over there, Sammy
yeah,
Darnold.
Yeah.
Phil, give us final thoughts here, and then we'll get our round the horn tournament takes real quick.
Yeah, sure. Defenses, I think you guys touched on the cash game. Defenses, I have Eagles, football team, Raiders, maybe the Cowboys for cash. In GPPs, I don't mind the Cardinals. Like I said, Trey Lance is going to give you some bad along with the good, assuming he starts. And then I don't mind flipping the script and going with the Texans in GPPs. They're also playing a rookie quarterback. Only this rookie quarterback is going to be on the road. Kind of a letdown spot after they had that big emotional game against Tom Brady last week. Nobody's going to be on the Texans because why would they? And I think that they're as viable as any defense in a tournament.
All right, let's get our final thoughts. I'm going to start it out with us here, guys, and I'm gonna take my quick tip for you, and it's not actually going to be about tournaments. It's going to be about cash games this week, especially this week when you look at San Francisco, Arizona, New York, and Dallas. Those two games are going to have a lot of guys that people are playing in cash games. So keep an eye on what you do in these early games and make sure you're following your games close and making the pivots accordingly. If you're playing early and you look at your opponent's lineup and he's got you blocked pretty much, or you can do the math yourself, don't be afraid to get off Amari Cooper and go to a Kenny Golladay. Those are the type of moves that you need to make to be a long-term, top-notch cash game player at the highest level. That's what the best players are doing. They're not just setting their lineups and forgetting it. They're always looking at what their opponents have going into 4 o'clock. And if you tank something early on, don't be afraid to make that pivot and try and gain some traction off the chalky players in the 4 o'clock games. And I think there's going to be quite a few of those here today. So that's my tip. John, I'm going to go to you next.
Excuse me. My tip's going to be very similar to last week. Last week, I recommended to everybody that you get over to Yahoo and play their, I think it was $250,000 overlay tournaments, and it sold out about 5 hours early last week. I anticipate a little bit more this week. This week, I just checked, they have a $150,000 overlay. And again, breaking down the math, that's basically for every $10 you put in, there's 11.5 coming back out. And if you go over to DraftKings, and I'm not saying anything bad about DraftKings, but it's the exact opposite. You're getting 85% back because they're taking 15% rake. That's a 30% difference that over the long haul means value to you as a player. And if you're putting money into play this week in tournament formats, I would urge you to get over there and fill that tournament up. It's called the $1 Million Baller on DraftKings, $20 buy-in.
On Yahoo.
Yes.
Yeah, and don't do what I did and play 40% Justin Fields like I did last week. That was not good. Okay, Phil, you're up next.
I already gave you mine. Don't play bad players. Just don't do that, and you'll be fine.
That's very good advice. That's simple but excellent advice. Devin, wrap us up here today.
Mine is piggybacking off of Phil. Don't play Leonard Fournette. I just can't trust him. If he burns me this week, fine, but I can't do it.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's going to be an interesting one because I kind of agree with you. I just don't know if I've got the conviction to do it.
There's too many good options. I mean, Damian Harris, you could go Damian Williams, but I'm going Perine this week, and we'll figure out some sort of bet between John and I when he gets back in 2 weeks.
I love it. All right. Again, you can find more of us, footballguys.com, RotoGrinders.com. If you are in to daily fantasy, both those places, obviously you're watching the show that you clearly would be. We've got plenty of tools that's going to make your life easier as a DFS player. And I want to thank John, Devin, and Phil. I'm Dan. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you again next week here on the Football Guys DFS Power Grid presented by RotoGrinders. See you, everybody.